This podcast is brought to you by On Track Studio. Hi guys, you're getting me before my coffee this morning, so that's just about never been done before. I'm always a long black girl, especially before I start to record, but I've been so busy and I need to get this podcast out because there's been so much happening. So I want to be going through the same model as I went through the last solo episode and sharing my wins, sharing my challenges, and then what I'm focusing on in business. There's been so many wins actually. I want to share the biggest one because that's why we're all here. Let's go for the highlight reel. We've got a new client coming on. They're actually going to get in to record this Friday, I believe. But we had our strategy and / onboarding call with them last week. And it was just an amazing win for me because it is within an industry that is absolutely crying out for this style of content, but no one's really doing it. In my research before the strategy, I had a look into if there was any other businesses that are running, a podcast or a YouTube channel within their industry. And I found a few, but when there's not that many, it's such a great opportunity to really disrupt your industry, really stand out from the crowd. I'll tell you what industry it is because, I don't need to give all the details away until they go live, but it's in the hospitality industry. And I've had so many hospo friends over the years since I've been running On Track, and all of them will back me up when I say I have been suggesting that they do a podcast since the dawn of time. So it's really cool. They've been hospo obviously flat out, and I think that's half the reason why they don't sort of go into this sort of in-depth marketing. They can just get away with their, social media content, like the, Instagram content, photos, videos, all that stuff. And that's the norm in that industry. But for this particular business, they've just expanded to their third location. I can tell they're going to be, I don't know if franchise is the right word, but there's a real big brand opportunity for them and so much expansion happening within their business. So it really does make sense. And I can't wait to get started on it. It's just honestly, such a huge win. And also a personal win I might share is I went away for the weekend. We went camping. I might pop up some videos of it. It was completely off grid, completely offline, no reception. And I'm not someone who's super addicted to my phone at all. When I'm at home, I'm not scrolling. I'm not really a big scroller. So I don't really feel, digital detox is as necessary as you would think because I work in social media kind of marketing and very content heavy job. So I think because I'm on my computer all day and everything, I just don't really have, that much call to go on social media when I'm at home. And if I do, it's quite enjoyable because I'm this is a bit like junk food. I'll just go on TikTok and be like, fuck, laughing my head off or learning something, and I really enjoy it. So I haven't done a digital detox in a while for that reason, but going away for 2 nights and 3 days and having absolutely no reception and just being absolutely not, called or being able to get access to apart from me and my partner, it was just I felt so refreshed after it. We did a massive hike. We did a freezing cold swim because it was honestly the coldest weekend of the year in Sunshine Coast. But yeah, and I just felt so refreshed and I'm I need to prioritize this more. And it was really expansive for me to be even though I wouldn't say I'm a scroller, to actually prioritize taking time away from digital world does you so good. So that's a personal win. Now into the challenge. So transparently, a big challenge for me has been studio bookings. I haven't had as much demand, and because I don't currently run any ads or anything, it's really just word of mouth. And it was a really big moment for me last week to be Sophie, what are you doing? Get some ads happening, get people to know about the studio. Because really the studio hire part of the business has really become a huge contributor to revenue and, keeping the business alive, and why I've been able to invest in, new editors and all this stuff. So yeah, it was a moment where I'm okay, I actually need to not just rely on manifestation techniques to draw people to me and start getting some ads happening or, get my marketing back up and running. So yeah, that was one challenge. But the main challenge I wanted to talk about today is it wasn't actually my challenge from last week, but it was a conversation I was having with a client of mine. And I think it's something I really want to talk about because it's something I've faced. And honestly, one of the biggest things that I see my clients face when they start creating with us at On Track Studio. And this was, in this particular instance, I won't go into all the details because it's not my story to share, but I'll give you the top line information so I can unpack what I need to talk about today. And it's basically, she came in to record her first episode. It was an intro episode to who she is. And we sent her the edited version. She called me. Well, she saw it. She loved it edit-wise. But she called me and she was like, look, I feel like I scraped the surface of what I actually wanted to delve into. I feel like, I stated facts instead of sharing actually something that's from within me. And for that reason, it felt like it was for her watching it back. When we watched it back, we were like, this is amazing, like how interesting. She's a very engaging speaker. But for her, because she knows the depth of the story she was trying to tell, she could tell that it was sort of cut off. So we had this conversation, and it was this, I was sort of sharing from my perspective how many times that we go up against this in this industry, because whether you're, I don't know, like mostly in business, right? But not necessarily, like everyone is a part of, social media. So therefore they're going through the same sort of things that we're normalizing. We're all addicted to short form content. Like everyone is on their Instagram, TikTok, and they're getting, the dopamine hit from short form content. And I think in turn that conditions people to speak quickly, to be very succinct, to say the top line, hook parts of what they want to say, but not go into the depth of what it is that they've got to share. And, because we're so conditioned from that in our consumption and in our, particularly if you're in business, like there is so much, the whole marketing industry is telling you that more content equals more sales, which is not true. But anyway, a debate for another day. So then when you come into a medium like podcasting or YouTubing, after being in the short form one, you're sort of like used to that, quick and cutting yourself off and just getting it out there. And because the point is to like quickly grab attention and then that's it. That's all the time you have. And I just thought I'd talk about it because, like I say, it actually happens to pretty much all of my clients, or the ones that are regularly recording or going in big with their podcast after, a long time, like wanting to do it. And I think it's because, for all the reasons I've mentioned, the point I'm trying to make is that podcasting, the reason why it's so powerful for audience building, community building is such a powerful business asset isn't because of the video and the audio. Like it's not because of the technical setup of the content. It's because it's a medium that allows you to actually share an in-depth, conversation, or an actual, get into the depth of the complexity of your story or depth of complexity of your expertise. And so people who come and they've just started a podcast, they do themselves a disservice by buying into the mainstream short form mentality in this medium. You can do it. People do it anyway. Like they'll come in and they'll just share facts, and they'll they tick the box. And I'm talking mostly to business owners here. People can come in and share and do that, like just sort of read what ChatGPT spat them out of, like facts or knowledge that they want to share, and they can tick the box, yes, I've done my content for this week, this month, whatever it is, pass it on to the editing teams, chop up all of the shorts, get their other social media platforms pumping with content. Like you can do that, and people do that. But those are the people that aren't getting that real, ROI from their content. They're not seeing their audience buy into their services. And this is particularly true for industries like the coaching industry. I'm really steering towards the coaching industry being a massive sort of passion for me because of the impact that so many great mentors and coaches have had on my life, but then also seeing how many coaches and mentors, they're not marketers, so they don't know how to get their message out there. So I mentioned them specifically, calling them out by name, because they are the people who I have seen get the highest return on this style of content when done in the way that obviously I'm promoting here, like actually not just, tick boxing content. Like I remember one of my clients, she was a PT and nutritionist, and she started with me and we did 12 weeks worth of my strategy, and we kind of follow. I actually am not sure if I've talked about it on my podcast before, but there's this specific methodology that I follow, and I've pulled from all different things that I've learned in my marketing, background, and also, obviously being in my own business and trying so many things. And I've basically got everything that I know works and removed everything I know doesn't, and distilled it into a method that I call the Wisdom Well method. And it's basically goes against, the whole, I think I have spoken about it on the podcast, and you may remember the metaphor I use where traditional social media approaches treat your knowledge like a bucket that constantly needs to be refilling, whereas the Wisdom Well method, it sort of initiates your content creation like you're digging a well deep, and that well will supply water for years to come. You know, it's not something you need to keep refilling. It's something that you can go and access once dug well. And I guess that's my approach that I'm speaking into when I'm talking about the difference between how some other people might create content versus what I'm saying genuinely works. And the main point I'm trying to make is it's not like you start a podcast and you get all the things that the Wisdom Well method promises and delivers, which is like massive, massive sales and all these things and audience growth. You need to actually have, if you could come onto a podcast and just use this medium the same way that you do with your short form content, it's not going to work. Anyway, I digress and I tell you about when I was talking about this coach that I used to work with, one of the very first people I was trying this method with. She had an existing audience on Instagram, right? So she would always manually be posting stories. If she had launches, she does like a program. And she had this new program coming out. And instead of, the slog of she was putting up to like 20 stories per day on her Instagram, plus her feed posts and, plus her like manual email writing and just to try to promote her programs. This time when she started with me, we put the Wisdom Well method to work. And we had content going out for her. We did it 12 weeks because we had less time and she had that really engaged Instagram audience. So it made sense for her because she was so used to that content creation grind anyway, just to come in and record, spend an hour, 30 minutes in studio and record 12 lots of episodes that went out weekly. She was able to get that short form content to also take the manual part out of her other social media platforms. And in this promotion, after zero, like not having anyone listening to her podcast at the beginning to the end of the 12 weeks where she launched this new program, and it was a $75,000 launch. So, that is the impact of, content when done well, when you're not cutting yourself off, when you're really like, allowing yourself to get out of the shortened hook 3 seconds to grab their attention psychology that social media conditions you to believe you really that's required. And to be fair, it is required on those short form platforms a lot, especially if you're talking to new audiences. You do have 1 to 2 seconds to grab their attention, but that is such a tiring exercise, especially for business owners who are the end result wanting to be people to buy from them. It's like, yeah, I just feel like it's such an opportunity for people to be accessing this medium. But what saddens me and what I'm seeing a lot of the time is that people take this medium, take this opportunity. They hear, potentially the likes of me saying the power of this type of content for a business. And then they come in and they accidentally use the short form mindset, and it does them a disservice. And then, they have to go through the lessons of, actually see how it didn't impact as hard as they wanted because for the reasons I've gone into. So if you're someone who's considering starting a podcast or going into a more long form content for your business, my biggest suggestion is to do your best to unlearn everything that you've learned from the short form platforms and take up space. Like, you don't want to just talk for no reason. Everyone asks me what the ideal time frame is for a long form piece of content. And my answer is for as long as it takes you to explain without going into too much explanation. Like you want I would say viewers and listeners thinking, oh, I want more of that. And then going and binging all the rest of your content, for example, if we're going to talk strategy. But the main thing I think for founders is to really make sure that they're speaking from something they're passionate about, something they care about, something that's purpose-driven, and then, sharing from that place and just allowing the medium to, once you take down your walls and really give from, generously and openly. And I say vulnerably, but I don't mean talking about your childhood trauma. I mean vulnerably in the sense you actually share what you mean without fear, or there might be fear of what other people think of what you're saying, or maybe people in your industry who have a different opinion and you think highly of these people in your industry and you don't want to rock the boat. And if, say, they saw your content and they thought, that's not what I believe. So these are all the mindset things that I hear my clients actually speak into of like why they're cutting themselves short within their content. And that is why podcasting is vulnerable, because you do have to, if you really want to share your wisdom and dig deep instead of scrambling to fill your bucket, then it needs to be, the pun, or not the pun, the metaphor is that, because it means you need to actually dig deep and share from within you, regardless of what everyone else has to say. And that's when you really start to see the impact of, the ripple effect of what you're creating, and therefore the ROI and the people buying into your services or product or whatever it is. And if you're someone listening to this and you're just here because you're a massive fan of me and you've got no real interest in podcasting or long form content if you're a business owner, then try this tactic also with your social media. You're not going to get as much views because you're not going for that hook, like grabby content that's going to pull people in within like 3 seconds. But the people who do watch, when you do, apply this wisdom well method psychology even to short form, you're going to get way more people who are actually interested in you, and way more people that are actually going to go from, viewing to engaging to purchasing. Whereas like a lot of the short form, methodologies that you hear, like, post a reel, post your stories, do your carousels, all of this stuff is talking about attention, which is only stage one of a marketing, strategy. Yes, you need to bring people in attention wise, but you also need to nurture them and get them, on board with who you are, what you're doing, and not in a salesy way. It's not called sales media. It's called social media. So do what it says. Be social, talk about, have conversations, be open, be honest, and then see how that social media starts working for you when you start using it for what it's meant to do. So yeah, that's my little rant and share on the challenge that I'm seeing my clients face. And by the way, I've definitely faced this myself. I've so been the person that has been so, in under the pump with social media content, especially for my clients back when I was really, really doing the my freelance marketing as well as running this business. And, I'd go into their content. They're like, I need 10 posts out, like, within the next 2 weeks. And they're chasing what they're hearing the social media gurus or the marketing industry tell them, which is more is more. And I'll go in, I'll churn it out because that's what I'm being paid to do. Then to come into my own business and like let go of what they're doing and actually apply the knowledge that I have and I know works was challenging at times. Like I would find myself, even coming into my own podcast and feeling like I'm just churning through the content, and that's not the point. It's not the point in this medium if you want it to really work for you. But just saying that I've been there and often sometimes do still default to that, because the reality is it's so much easier to go top line surface level content than it is to actually take the time to dig deep, share something, in its complexity, and allow it to be there and have the grace for yourself to just let that be. And you don't necessarily get those quick win vanity metrics like your likes and views. So that can sometimes, when you're used to that grind on social media, which is rewarding the vanity metrics, when you come and share, it can be, it can be dysregulating for people who aren't used to it. So anyway, that's my insight. That's my share. That's my, prep for anyone who's in this game and sharing or wanting to actually create content with a bit more depth. That's my advice. And now I will go into my focus for this week. And the main focus for me is actually, it's a tough one. I want to say that I'm going to go and run those ads that I talked about, that my challenge was for last week. But honestly, transparently, the reason they're not running is because I don't have enough emphasis on that being my priority. Like I'm really focused on my book, as you know, that I talk about every week. And that just gets right away in terms of my creative power. And so that's like, I said that last time we did this episode, so I'm not going to use that as my main focus. But I think the second focus is really just going to be client work. We've got that new hospo business starting, and I really love when new businesses start to really give them my presence, give them my energy. They're coming in on Friday, and so I'm going to be really focusing on that. And I mean, we're Tuesday now. I'm self-aware. The main focus for the next 7 days is really going to be helping them. And then when I get a spare chance, I'll get those ads run to get some more awareness, get some more buy-in from people who want to use the studio, because it's how you do it. You got to get that. You got to get that money. You got to get that money, honey. So thanks so much for listening. I will be back in your podcast or YouTube feeds whenever it's due. Anyway, I'm going to leave you guys to your day, night, or whenever you're listening to this or watching along, and I'll see you next time. Thanks so much.